Hey, good morning everyone, and welcome back to the dungeon. I'm your host as usual, Dungeon Master Vibe, and I'm back today for another D&D class review. So before we get started, just a few things get out of the way. So as you may be aware, we typically do this sort of thing on Monday mornings. However, I'm going to have some stuff going on tomorrow morning, predominantly being driving back from a little trip, and so won't be able to stream tomorrow morning. So I've decided to move it to this morning right now, the thing you're watching currently. So yeah. Additionally, as far as the D&D story content goes, unfortunately, as those of you who have played Dungeons & Dragons before, as you know, sometimes life happens and sometimes campaigns fall apart. And unfortunately, that is just the case with one of the campaigns I have been running currently. Predominantly the one in which I've been telling you stories of on some of these morning story times. So unfortunately, the campaign I've been running, Heroes of the Frontier, will not be able to be completed at this time. Maybe sometime in the future it will come to its conclusion, but at the very least for now, that is unfortunately not the case. Still, thank you guys for listening to those stories and being supportive of my content. Music too low? There we go. Trying a different track today, found some more string beats. Oh yeah, with that in mind, I'll probably go keep this playing in the background, so I'm going to go ahead and give a little plug there. So this is from Stream Beats. It is available on Spotify. It is copyright-free music made for the purpose of live streaming by other users. This song in particular you're hearing in the background is called Enchanting Table by Harris Heller. Some alliteration right there. Harris Heller, and on the album named called Diamonds. So yeah, so if you're looking for some good beats and you've got any good songs of your own, because I unfortunately do not, this is might be a good option for you. So yeah, without further ado then, so today's class review we are going to be talking about the Cleric, the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition's premium support character, and be frank, one of, if not the strongest class in Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, for a number of reasons that we'll be getting into over the course of this. So as usual, first we will go over sort of the core mechanics of the class, and then some of the subclasses. The Cleric is one of the classes that has the most subclass, however, so I'm only going to be reviewing the base player handbook subclasses and not the ones featured in the additional books. I will most likely also be doing that whenever we get to the Wizard, as the Wizard also has a lot of subclasses, but I might do a few of those other ones too, because the Wizard got some cool ones that were featured in later books. But we're not here to talk about the Wizard, we're talking about the Cleric. So, first and foremost, the Cleric. Cleric is one of what we would call a full caster. They are a character who, from level 1, has access to spellcasting and gains spells all the way up to 9th level spell slots. Their main spellcasting ability is Wisdom, and the secondary recommended stat for the Cleric is Charisma, as they are a very wholly aligned character whose main aspect is to spread the word of their different deities. Now, with that in mind, that is adding Charisma as your kind of secondary skill as a Cleric is definitely more for flavor text and roleplay purposes. Personally, you'll find a lot of good use from adding something such as Strength or Constitution as a Cleric as well. It all comes down to how you want to play the game, which is another reason why I really like the Cleric and why they are one of my favorite classes. Is they are a very customizable class in overall playstyle, especially when you start getting into all the subclasses. As well as they have a couple of interesting mechanics as to starting equipment. Now then, base proficiencies for the Cleric is light armor, medium armor, shields, and simple weapons. They have saving throws in Wisdom and Charisma, as well as they get to choose skills from History, Insight, Medicine, Persuasion, and Religion. As for starting equipment, they are able to start with a mace or a warhammer if proficient. Now, as I just listed, they do not have proficiency with warhammer as a base cleric. However, when you choose your certain archetypes, you actually gain additional proficiency, similar to the artifice that we reviewed a little while back. They likewise gain access to scale mail, leather armor, or chainmail, once again, if they are proficient in it, like crossbow, or another simple weapon, as well as they can get a priest pack or an explorer's pack. They also gain a shield and holy symbol with no additional costs necessary. So the cleric will always have access to a shield when creating one at level 1. Now then, as far as the cleric spellcasting goes, their mechanics are quite different from a couple of the other casters. They are what you might refer to as certain circles would refer to them as divine caster, holy caster, whatever you want to call it. I typically refer to it as a divine caster. So their overall methods for casting the spells are different and draw from a different source as far as a roleplay mechanic goes. In this case being that they are gifted to them by their respective deities. Now then, for the cleric, you start off with 3 cantrips of your choice, and they of course have to be from the cleric spell list. Now then, where the spellcasting begins to differ is when it comes down to the preparing and casting of spells. When it comes to cleric, you do not learn spells at all. As a matter of fact, you always have access to the entire cleric spell list. However, you can only prepare a number of spells equal to your wisdom modifier and cleric level. And of course, they have to be of a level in which you have spell slots to cast them. So, after long rest, you can of course rearrange your prepared spells, and so you could one day of adventuring have Cure Wounds, and then the next swap Cure Wounds for any other cleric spell. For this purpose, clerics are very versatile from the day-to-day, and definitely so for long-term adventures that involve a lot of travel. They can essentially pick spells to fit any terrain, so long as they are given the time to prepare the necessary components and spell choices. As I mentioned before, Wisdom is the spellcasting ability modifier, and they do have access to ritual casting, which, if you're not familiar, ritual casting essentially means you spend 10 extra minutes to cast the spell, but doing so makes you able to cast a spell without spending a spell slot. This predominantly is just used for spells that don't really have combat capabilities, and so would predominantly be being used outside of combat. Things like Identify or some higher level divinations would make use of the ritual feature. And of course, the spells that are able to be ritual cast have that listed within the spell's description. Now then, the cleric itself actually gains ability to the subclasses at level 1. They are one of the very few classes that are able to do this, but the only other one, I believe, being the warlock, if I'm remembering correctly. The subclasses for cleric are referred to as divine domains, and in the base player handbook, they have access to essentially one that pertains to each of the in-game domains of the different gods, with some additional ones, once, as I mentioned, being added in later books. In the base player handbook, these domains are knowledge, life, light, nature, tempest, trickery, and war. Each of these give the cleric a different number of abilities and bonuses when they are picked, and of course as they level up, as well as they give them different domain spells, which are spells as is the case with most casters and half casters. Certain levels within your leveling up gains you access to spells that do not count against your number of prepared spells, and that is true with cleric as well, with the domain spells always being prepared and not counting against the number of spells that they can have prepared each day. This does give them access to a couple spells that typically would not even be a cleric spell as well. And a number of those are quite useful, as you'll see later on when we get into talking about the subclasses of the cleric. Now, as far as the base abilities go, we have a few more to talk about. The first up is Channel Divinity, Turn Undead. So the cleric gains access to an ability referred to as Channel Divinity. They have the base ability of Turn Undead that all clerics have access to, as well as channel divinities that are specific to the different subclasses. Now then, as far as Turn Undead goes, As an action, you present your holy symbol and speak a prayer censoring the undead. Each undead that can see or hear you within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw. If the creature fails the save, it is turned for 1 minute or until it takes any damage. A turned creature must spend its turn trying to move as far away from you as it can, and it can't willingly move to a space within 30 feet of you. It also can't take reactions. For its action, it can only use the dash action or try to escape from any effect that prevents it from moving. If there's nowhere to move, the creature can use the dodge action. So, typically, what this is doing is it takes undead, which typically would be immune to things such as fear or most charms, and it makes them absolutely terrified of you. They can only run away for a solid minute or until they take damage. This is good to use if you are trying to get the party some breathing room from a large horde of zombies or skeletons, or if you just choose to not have to deal with the combat that's presented by this horde of undead monsters. This ability actually becomes stronger once you hit 5th level, as it becomes Destroy Undead. With that, when an undead fails its saving throw against your turn undead creature, the creature is instantly destroyed if its challenge rating is at or below a certain threshold, as shown in the Destroyed Undead table. This table is as follows. At the 5th level, C or 1/2 or lower, they are destroyed. At level 8, it is 1 or lower, 11, 2 or lower, 14th, 3 or lower, 17th, 4 or lower. So with that, as you level up, you'll see that this is, of course, mostly a feature that's going to affect weaker undead, things like skeletons, zombies. But typically such creatures, especially once you start hitting those higher levels, are going to be showing up in large numbers, as that is really where they thrive, especially things like zombies. So basically, you take this massive horde of undead, let it surround you, and then you launch this ability that is, 30 feet centered on you, and you just destroy a massive horde of zombies. Like, you can kill like 30, 20, like who knows how many of these things all at once, so long as they fail the saving throw to resist the ability. Keeping in mind that this is not a damaging ability, it simply instantly destroys them. Meaning there's essentially, especially with them being undead, no means by which this effect can be prevented, as well as the fact that this is not a spell, it is a class ability, therefore it cannot be counterspelled or anti-magicked or anything of that sort. Though I guess at certain tables they might argue that certain class abilities count as magical and might be subject to such things, but if you were sitting at my table, it would not be affected by such things. And the final base ability for the Cleric is Divine Intervention. As you'll see, this is a 10th level ability. You'll see that the majority of the Cleric's abilities do actually come from the Divine Domains, which does make sense as they gain access to their Divine Domains at level 1. As opposed to most other classes that only gain access to their subclasses at the 3rd level and few of them at 2nd. Now then, Divine Intervention is a rather interesting ability and requires a lot of cooperation between the player and the DM. Beginning at 10th level, you can call on your deity to intervene on your behalf when your need is great. Imploring your deity's aid requires you to use your action. Describe the assistance you seek and roll a percentile die. If you're not familiar, the percentile die is essentially 2 d10s, with one of those d10 being double digits showing 10, 20, 30, and so on. And the other one being a regular d10 acting as the single digit number in that combination. So, like, say you roll a 20 on the larger one, and then a 1 on the other. That is a 21. Anyways, so you roll a percentile die and describe the assistance you require. If you roll a number equal to or lower than your cleric level, your deity intervenes. The DM chooses the nature of the intervention. The effect of any cleric spell or cleric domain spell would be appropriate. If your deity intervenes, you can't use this feature again for 7 days. Otherwise, you can use it again after you finish a long rest. At 20th level, your call for intervention succeeds automatically, no roll required. Which sounds super powerful, but to be frank, most campaigns end before or right at level 20, so you wouldn't have access to such a thing for too long, as well as depending on who you're playing with, that ability can be either very powerful or not too powerful, and basically acting as a free spell slot that is honestly hard to get a hold of. So at the end of the day, this is very much a spell that's dependent on what you and your DM are willing to decide is feasible with the ability, without breaking the overall narrative. Now then, so with that, we'll go ahead and start hopping into our divine domains. So as I said before, there are a number of these available in the base play handbook, and those are what we're going to be going over, and we'll just go down them in order. So first up is the knowledge domain. The gods of knowledge, including Agma, Bokop, Gideon, Aron, and Thoth. Don't know if I've pronounced any of those correctly, so bear with me. Value learning and understanding above all. Some teach that knowledge is to be gathered and shared in libraries and universities, or promote the practical knowledge or craft and intervention. Some deities hoard knowledge and keep it secret to themselves, and some promise their followers that they will gain tremendous power if they unlock the secrets of the multiverse. Followers of said deities, followers of these gods study esoteric lore, collect all tomes, delve into the secret places of the earth, and learn all they can. Some gods of knowledge promote the practical knowledge of craft and invention, including smith deities like Gond, Rurix, Onator, Moradin, Hephaestus, and Goibin. That one's hard to say. Yeah. So with the knowledge domain, you gain these additional spells. First level, you get Command and Identify. Third, Augury Suggestion. Fifth, Non-Detection, Speak with Dead. Seventh, Arcane Eye, Confusion. Ninth, Legend Lore, Scrying. Now then, keeping those spells in mind, here's one of my big takeaways with the different cleric domains. A lot of the cleric domains basically tend to dictate if your cleric is more of a close range support or a long range support. With the knowledge domain, I would say being more of a long range support, as most of their abilities give them access to things to help from a bit further back and not acting as a sort of a secondary tank. With most of the stuff being more, honestly, more out of combat type things. Stuff such as Identify, Augury, Speak with Dead, Legend Lore, things that help you assist the party in discovering secrets about dungeons and ancient items and such and such. Now then, as far as the abilities you gain Blessing of Knowledge. At first level, you learn 2 languages of your choice, and you also become proficient in your choice of 2 of the following skills: Arcana, History, Nature, or Religion. Your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability check you make that uses either of those skills. Let's see, at level 2, you gain a new Channel Divinity, Knowledge of the Ages. You can use your Channel Divinity to tap into a divine well of knowledge. As an action, you choose one skill or tool, and for 10 minutes, you have proficiency with the chosen skill or tool. Essentially with this, if you know your party is going to be heading into a particular test or something where you need a lot of knowledge on, you can use this ability to give your character a temporary boost towards that, which can be very helpful if you're in a very kind of low charisma party or a party that's not the most intelligent and you have an investigation to do. This will give you a nice little bonus towards succeeding in the current goal. At level 6, you gain another Channel Divinity, Read Thoughts. 6th level, you can use your Channel Divinity to read a creature's thoughts, and you can use your access to the creature's mind to command it. As an action, choose one creature that you can see within 60 feet of you. That creature must make a Wisdom saving throw. If the creature succeeds on a saving throw, you can't use this feature on it again until you finish a long rest. If the creature fails its save, you can read its surface thoughts, those foremost in its mind, reflecting its current emotions and what it actively thinking about. When it is within 60 feet of you, this effect lasts for 1 minute. During that time, you can use your action to end this effect and cast the Suggestion spell on the creature without expending a spell slot. Target automatically fails its saving throw against the spell. So that's another thing with the knowledge domain, is its number of command and suggestions such makes it one that is very good at controlling individual enemies on the battlefield, which can be quite useful if you have a enemy caster that's going to be buffing up the enemy's front line and things like that. It can be the knowledge cleric's job to kind of help debilitate such enemies and keep them from providing that support. Okay, and at level 8, the cleric gains potent spellcasting. You add your wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with any cleric cantrip. as I said, this is a cleric that is more focused on long range, therefore you would want to use this for more range type cleric abilities, things like Toll the Dead and such. Okay, and the final ability of the Knowledge Domain is Visions of the Past. You can call up visions of the past that relate to an object you hold or your immediate surroundings. You spend at least 1 minute in meditation and prayer, then receive dreamlike, shadowy glimpses of recent events. You meditate in this way for a number of minutes equal to your wisdom score, and must maintain concentration during that time, as if you were casting a spell. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. Now then, with that you can do object reading, which holding an object as you meditate, you can see visions of the object's previous owner. After meditating for a minute, you learn how the owner acquired and lost the object, as well as the most recent significant event involving the object and that owner. If the object was owned by another creature in the recent past within a number of days equal to your wisdom score, you can spend 1 additional minute for each owner to learn the same information about that creature. So with that, you can learn a good bit about, say, like old ancient items or stuff you managed to swipe from the big bad guy. Like I said, this cleric is very useful for your outer combat exploration type events. You can also use it for area reading. As you meditate, you see visions of recent events in your immediate vicinity. A room, street, tunnel, clearing, or the like, up to 50-foot cube. Going back a number of days equal to your wisdom score. For each minute you meditate, you learn about one significant event. Beginning with the most recent. Significant events typically involve powerful emotions such as battles and betrayals, marriages and murders, births and funerals. However, they might also include more mundane events that are nevertheless important to your current situation. So once again, this is another ability that's very dependent between you and the DM to decide what would have been most prominent and what you could learn through the ability. Now then, the next divine domain is the life domain. This particular domain is 100% a very heavy support, with dealing out some of the most healing capable of the cleric in the game, with the exception of a few of the later added archetypes. Now then, the life domain. Life domain focuses on the vibrant positive energy, one of the fundamental forces of the universe that sustain all life. Gods of life promote vitality and health through healing the sick and wounded, caring for those in need, and driving away the forces of death and undeath. Almost any non-evil deity can claim influence over this domain, particularly agricultural deities such as Shantae, Alway, and Demeter. Sun gods such as Lathander, Pelor, and Hoakthai. Gods of healing or endurance such as Ilmater, Mishakal, Apollo, and Dianset. And gods of home and community such as Hestia, Hathor, and Baldre. Now then, as I said, this is going to be a very healing-oriented cleric, which could be just the thing you're looking for if you're praying to be the predominant and main support of the party. Though something very important to keep in mind is when you're the cleric, your goal is not to keep every single party member at maximum hit points. That is impossible to do during a fight, and if you try to do that, you're going to run out of hit point spell slots before you do anything significant. Your main goal is to make sure they stay alive, and are boosted enough to avoid those big hits and able to deal out more damage than the enemy is dealing. Now then, with that in mind, though, it is very important to, of course, keep them alive, and the life cleric has plenty of things to prevent a party member's death. First up is their domain spells. Majority of their domain spells are pretty much all already cleric spells, so they don't really gain anything outside the norm, but it is very useful that they can have these spells prepared at all times without expending any of their slots for preparing the spells. For example, you get Bless and Cure Wounds at level 1. Both very good and sought after cleric levels, cleric spells that you will be using throughout the entire campaign, I can assure you, with Bless being one of the best support abilities that cleric gains early on. At third level, you gain Lesser Restoration and Spiritual Weapon, another big hitter. 5th level, you get Beacon of Hope and Revivify, both fantastic. 7th, Death Ward, Guardian of Faith, and 9th, Mass Cure Wounds and Raise Dead. All in all, Life Domain spell list, absolutely clutch, and every single one of them are some of the honestly most important cleric spells that, when possible, I like to always have prepared. As these are some of the biggest hitters as far as supporting the party goes, in particular with Bless and things like Mass Cure Wounds. Now then, you do gain bonus proficiencies with the Life Cleric. You gain a proficiency with Heavy Armor, which allows you to gain the Chainmail at character creation at level 1, which is very good, as that makes it to where not only is the Life Cleric a main support, but they are also somewhat of, I guess, an off-tank, you could say, as they are able to tank hits as they make their way to their allies to provide support and healing. Not necessarily dealing that damage themselves, but able to tank their way through the battlefield to provide support. Additionally, at level 1, they gain access to Disciple of Life. Your healing spells are more effective. Whenever you use a spell first level higher to restore hit points to the creature, regains an additional hit points equal to 2 plus the spell's level. So right off the bat, you're always doing more healing, regardless of what spell it is. As it says, it does specify it has to be a spell first level or higher, but I feel like that's not really too necessary, as unless I'm mistaken, there are not any cantrips that actually cause any healing or other forms of regaining hit points. Only first level spells and higher can do this. So I suppose it's important to clarify such things, but also I feel like it's not super necessary, so don't get too hung up on some of the wording there. At level 2, they gain the first of the new Channel Divinities. Actually, that said, they only gain... Yes, actually, the Life Domain only gains this one additional Channel Divinity. They gain Preserve Life. Starting at 2nd level, you can use your Channel Divinity to heal the badly injured. As an action, you present your holy symbol and evoke healing energy that can restore a number of hit points equal to 5 times your cleric level. Choose any creature within 30 feet of you and divide those hit points among them. This feature can restore a creature to no more than half of its hit point maximum. You can't use this feature on an undead or a construct. So, this is a very useful Channel Divinity, as unlike most Channel Divinities which affect enemies, and as such requires saving throws, and so it has a capability of failing and then not being able to be used at all for the rest of the day. This one is only used on allies, no saves or anything required, and so is just an auto success. With that, you're able to provide a good chunk of healing to a good number of the party members. Now, you're not going to be topping anyone off with this unless, well actually no, not unless anything, because as it states, you can only heal them up to half their hit point maximum. You cannot fully heal anyone with this. I believe the purpose of this is to really get you to spread that healing out and not focus it on individuals, as this is an early level AoE healing effect, which you don't get for quite a few levels as far as actual healing spells go. The majority of healing spells that do cover a wide area do actually a significantly smaller amount of healing per person. Whereas with this, as you're leveling higher and higher up, this ability is going to scale with your level and provide a good chunk of change of that heals. Now then, at level 6, you gain Blessed Healer. The healing spells you cast on others heal you as well. When you cast a spell first level higher that restores hit points to a creature other than you, you regain hit points equal to 2 plus the spell's level. So with that, like I said, your goal is basically to just tank hits and heal your allies. And at this point, once you hit this level, you're not only tanking those hits and healing your allies, but as you're tanking those hits, you're healing yourself as you're healing your allies. So basically, you don't even need to be spending spell slots on yourself necessarily, unless you just take something that's way too much damage for you to really be staying in the fight for much longer. But this will certainly buy you some extra time, and while you focus on supporting everyone else and not spending too many slots on your own person. And at level 8, they gain Divine Strike. A lot of clerics gain Divine Strike abilities, which are basically abilities that allow them to do a bit of extra damage whenever they are attacking. The version of this you would have gotten from the Knowledge Domain would have been the Potent Spellcasting. Basically, most clerics gain some form of Potent Spellcasting or some form of Divine Strike, allowing them to deal more damage with spells or more damage with melee attacks. As I said, basically the different cleric domains dictate towards a longer range or close range oriented style, with the Life Domain being more focused on a close range style, as, for example, the Channel Divinity feature, Preserve Life, that is an AoE centered on themselves, so it does behoove you as a life cleric to stay close to the party, which is something that will bring you more mid-ground to front line, especially with you being a heavy armored individual. Now then, as I was saying, the Divine Strike that you gain at level 8 as this cleric, infuse your weapon strikes with divine energy. Once on each of your turns when hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can cause the attack to do an extra 1d8 radiant damage to the target. And when you hit 14th level, the extra damage increases to 2d8. Now then, this is a good way to get some extra hits in if, say, someone's down and you're focusing on bonus actions to heal your allies. But don't let this pull you too far into trying to be a main damage dealer, as you only get one attack as a cleric, and if you're spending your action every turn to make a melee attack, you're going to start lagging behind on some of your other abilities. Granted, clerics have a lot of concentration-oriented bonus. Blah, 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 blah. Sorry, I'm tongue-tied. It's morning. It's still the morning. My mouth's a little dry. Anyways, a lot of the cleric spells are AoE effects that have prolonged concentration casting times, meaning you can maintain them and still do other things. If you have one of those going, that's at the point in which you would want to perhaps start using your actions for simpler things such as weapon attacks. One example of this being Bless, which allows you to gain the, like I said, very good, very early level boost for your allies, getting multiple people an extra d4 for attack rolls and such. And all the while, I believe that is concentration as well, so you don't want to be casting other concentration spells at the same time. Now then, and the final ability of the Life Domain is the Supreme Healing. When you would normally roll one or more dice to restore hit points with a spell, you instead use the highest number possible for each die. For example, instead of restoring 2d6 hit points to a creature, you restore 12. So, once you hit level 17, if you cast a healing spell, you will always heal the maximum number possible, which is, of course, going to stack with your Disciple of Life, as well as Blessed Healer, and all those other such effects. So, as such, you have now become the most potent healer basically in the game, with the exception of some later added classes. We'll maybe get into that another time, though. So, yes, so Life Domain is a full-on healer with abilities that make them well suited to actually being a tank as well. So something to kind of second up your fighters and paladins even on the front line, and being more than well suited to keeping those guys up and at them, and keeping your enemies away from the back line. Next up, we have the Light Domain. Light Domain is actually personal favorite of mine. Gives me lots of Dark Souls, Praise the Sun type vibes. So the Light Domain, Gods of Light, including Helm, Nathana, Fortress, Branchella, the Silver Flame, Balanos, Paulo, and Rehorkathai, promote the ideas of rebirth and renewal, truth, vigilance, and beauty, often using the symbol of the sun. Some of these gods are portrayed as the sun itself, or as a charioteer who guides the sun across the sky. Others are tireless sentinels whose eyes pierce every shadow and see through every deception. Some are deities of beauty and artistry who teach that art is a vehicle for the soul's improvement. Clerics of a god of light are enlightened souls infused with radiance and the power of the god's discerning vision, charged with chasing away lies and burning away darkness. Now then, your domain spells for this are going to be, at first level, Blending Hands and Fairy Fire, 3rd, Flaming Sphere, Scorching Ray, 5th, Daylight, Fireball, 7th, Guardian Faith, Wall of Fire, 9th, Flame Strike, Scrying. And you also gain a bonus cantrip. When you choose this domain at first level, you gain the Light cantrip if you don't already know it. Now then, first thing you're going to notice here is majority of the domain spells are damage dealing spells, predominantly, of course, being fire-oriented attacks. Now then, something that, in my opinion, is one of the main points towards this being a more actually offensive-oriented cleric. But when it comes to your more offensive clerics, especially ranged ones such as this, as most of these are going to be ranged type spells, they are very good at area control, which is another big thing with a cleric. A lot of their attack damaging abilities are not single target, but area of effect abilities. This one in particular, gaining Burning Hands, Flaming Sphere, Scorching Ray, Scorching Ray is an area effect. Flaming Sphere, Fireball, wall of fire, flame strike, things like that. Can cover wide areas, or at the very least target multiple enemies at once. With that, they become very good at what I like to refer to as area control. Essentially, lets you cut up the battlefield and keep certain enemies from going to certain areas, or forcing them into different positions as they try to avoid these big walls of fire and massive fireballs blasting craters in the battlefield. Clerics like this are very good at, supporting your allies from the back line and forcing the enemy into more advantageous positions for your team. Now, at level 1, you also gain Warding Flare. You can interpose Divine Light between yourself and an attacking enemy. When you are attacked by a creature within 30 feet of you that you can see, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on the attack roll, causing light to flare before it hits or misses. An attacker that can't be blinded is immune to this feature, however. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier, minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. Now, as you see there, this is not a tanky cleric, however. They don't gain access to heavy armor, don't have martial weapons. This is backline, ranged cleric. With that in mind, though, they do gain this ability here, which allows them to, if an enemy does make it to them, they can blind them, and then move off to a better position and continue their assault. So this one is very oriented towards playing the battlefield, and as I said, area control, cutting it up. Now then, the channel divinity that they gain is Radiance of the Dawn. Starting at 2nd level, you can use your channel divinity to harness sunlight, banishing darkness, and dealing radiant damage to your foes. As an action, you present your holiday symbol, and any magical darkness within 30 feet of you is dispelled. Additionally, each hostile creature within 30 feet of you must make a Constitution saving throw. Creature takes radiant damage equal to 2d10 plus your cleric level on a failed save, and half as much on success. Creature that has total cover from you is not affected. Now, this being a level 2 ability, this is actually very nice, as it gives you a very early way to deal with darkness, which definitely is an ability that kind of falls off a bit later levels, but early level it can be a bit difficult to deal with, as it can snuff out things like light, and don't have a lot of ways to really deal with it once it has been activated. But right here, you gain an ability that does not expend any spell slots. It not only dispels that darkness, but damages enemies, completely affecting your allies. So this is also an AoE damaging effect that is not going to hurt your allies, no matter how close they are. And additionally, since it scales with your level, it'll stay useful throughout your campaign, as even that damage it deals is going to keep going up. 6th level, you gain Improved Flare. You can also use your Warding Flare feature when a creature that you can see within 30 feet of you attacks a creature other than you. So, like I said, once again, area control. You can now use this ability at range and not only on yourself. So you see an enemy about to blast one of your allies with some big attack. You use that flare, impose that disadvantage, and possibly even save that ally's life as a result. Really potent, but pretty basic. It's like you can read that. It's very easy to tell what to do with this one. Personally speaking, I would say, but is nonetheless very useful ability. And the final ability of the Light Domain is Corona of Light. Starting at 7th level, you can use your action to activate an aura of sunlight that lasts for 1 minute, or until you dismiss it using another action. You emit bright light in a 60-foot radius and dim light for an additional 30 feet beyond that. Your enemies in the bright light have disadvantage on saving throws against any spell that deals fire or radiant damage. So with that, you essentially once again have now boosted all radiant and fire damage abilities, and wouldn't you know, as a Light Domain Cleric, that is pretty much all your damaging spells. This pairs very nicely if you have another wizard or sorcerer in the party, as well as things such as Fireball tend to be a bit of a favorite whenever it's available to a spellcaster. And a 60-foot radius area like that, being the bright light, the dim light does not cause this effect on the bright light, but still, that's bright light for a 60-foot radius. So not only are you providing a lot of light if you're battling in a dark area and have allies who don't have dark vision, but for this very wide area, your enemies are going to be taking extra damage from pretty much all your spellcasters, who a lot of their attacks are going to be fire, with fire being one of the most common common damage types in the game. Second only to, of course, more martial type attacks. Now, the one downside to this domain, I would say, is actually counter to what I was saying about fire being a very common damage type, is fire is also one of the most common damage resistances in the game. Second only to, I would say, I believe, poison. I think poison is second, if not maybe actually number one on that list of damage resistances. So that is really the only spot in which this cleric lacks a bit, is as most of the stuff is improving fire damage. They do, of course, get radiant damage as well with a number of these things, but as far as those expended spell list goes, it's mostly fire damage. And so a lot of enemies, especially later game, are going to have some resistance to that fire. Especially if you're playing in a setting such as Descent into Avernus, or other things that have you dealing with a lot of fiends, in which case a number of them are going to have that fire resistance. Same thing if you're playing in a setting that's going to have you dealing with a lot of elementals. Which does bring up a little bit of a side point. Try to figure out, if you're trying to play to the party, what's going to help the party the most, and not just doing what I usually do, which is, make a character that I think sounds cool, if I'm to be honest. Which, by the way, nothing wrong with that. It's a role-playing game. Make the character you think is going to be fun to play. But it is always good to keep in mind what the party already has, and so try not to, always have, too many duplicates in the party. Otherwise, gameplay can get a bit, honestly, boring, almost, as pretty much everyone's doing the same thing on their turn. As well as a bit less suited towards dealing with a wider variety of tasks. In any case, though, our next domain is the nature domain. I believe we're about halfway through here. Yes, we're about halfway through. So nature domain is next. So the gods of nature are as varied as the natural world itself, from inscrutable gods of the deep forest, such as Sylvanas, Obad High, Chisle, Balinor, and Pan, to friendly deities associated with particular springs and groves such as Eldath. Druids view nature as a whole and might serve one of these deities, practicing mysterious rites and reciting all but forgotten prayers in their own secret tongue. But many of these gods have clerics as well, champions who take a more active role in advancing the interest of a particular nature god. These clerics might hunt the evil monstrosities that destroy the woodlands, bless the harvest of the faithful, or wither the crops of those who anger their gods. So this is definitely a cleric that can synergize quite well with a druid, I would say. Basically, if you want to go with sort of that naturey feel, but the overall playstyle of the druid just isn't quite your style, this would be another good option for you. As well as room for a lot of fun dynamics between, say, a nature cleric and a druid in your party, I would say. Now then, as far as the domain spells go, of course, a lot of very nature-oriented things, such as animal friendship, speak with animals, bark skin, spike growth, plant growth, wind wall, dominate beasts, grasping vine, insect plague, and tree stride. You also gain the ability Acolyte of Nature. At first level, you learn one druid cantrip of your choice. You also gain proficiency in one of the following skills of your choice: animal handling, nature, or survival. And you gain the bonus proficiency with heavy armor. So this is another tank-oriented cleric, but not necessarily a damage-dealing one. Actually, I'd say this one's kind of feels a mixed role, I would say, as far as the base spells go, as they have a lot of utility type spells, as well as some more area control type stuff. So this one has a bit of a more of a mixed role, I would say. We'll see some more of that once we get into some of the abilities here. So Charm Divinity, charm animals and plants. At second level, you can use your Charm Divinity to charm animals and plants. As an action, you present your holy symbol and invoke the name of your deity. Each beast or plant creature that can see you within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw. If the creature fails its saving throw, it is charmed by you for 1 minute or until it takes damage. While it is charmed by you, it is friendly to you and other creatures you designate. So this, honestly, if anything, almost feels like you gain additional uses of, say, the Turn Undead, as it has a similar area effect and affects similar creatures, though it's, of course, not undead. It's almost like an opposite Turn Undead, honestly. A Turn Undead scares away undead things, whereas this charms living things, being being animals and plants. So with this can be pretty useful, I would say, early game or in campaigns that bring you to a lot of more forested areas, forest and jungles and such. But might not always come the most handy in more urban type settings. So that, once again, like I said, make sure you know the setting you're in and make a character that makes sense for the setting. At level 6, you gain Dampen Elements. When you or a creature within 30 feet of you takes acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage, you can use your reaction to grant resistance to the creature against the instance of the damage. As I said, this is another tankier cleric, with this one providing this additional defensive effect for itself or allies. Now, with this being a reaction and no limit on the number of times it can be used, you can constantly use this throughout your adventuring. The only limit being, action economy, being you can only use one reaction per turn. But even so, with those being the majority of the damage types that most spells are going to be dealing, you're able to provide resistances to most fights against anything that's going to be dealing magic type damage, which is going to be very huge, especially if your party is lacking in spellcasters. You gain a Divine Strike ability as this type of cleric. You gain the ability to infuse your weapon strikes with divine energy, and once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with weapon attack, you can cause the attack to do an extra 1d8 cold, fire, or lightning damage, your choice, to the target. When you reach 14 level, extra damage comes 2d8. This Divine Strike is actually, I think, one of my preferred ones, as it has a lot more potential uses, as you can choose from a number of different damage types. This allows you to possibly kind of test out an enemy, figure out what they are and are not resistant to, and find the best course of action for defeating it. So this is, I would say, really a cleric that excels at really getting to that front line and really being side by side with characters such as your fighters, paladins, and other more frontline type characters, and helping them figure out how best to deal with the enemy, all while providing a bit of support on the side, as well as keeping smaller, sort of more pet type enemies off of you. And the final ability they gain is Massive Nature. While creatures are charmed by your charm animals and plants feature, you can take a bonus action on your turn to verbally command and what each of those creatures would do on its next turn. So this is something that I find that can be good all in all, and this cleric as a whole I think can be well suited if you're playing in a campaign where the DM's not worried about you having a bunch of pets. I would say it's very useful if you're going to be having a lot of, say, animal type companions with you, or just going to be traveling in areas that's going to have a lot of heavily forested and lots of wilderness type animals. If you're not really in a setting like that, however, I'll be honest, I feel like this cleric really loses a lot of its usability and a lot of its fun that a character could have with it. So this is a cleric that I feel like is very important to be sure what type of setting you'll be in and what type of encounters you might, be encountering. Because otherwise, you might lose out on a lot of the class's actual abilities. So I would say choose this one a bit more cautiously, if I'm to speak personally. And just, really double check with your DM and make sure you understand the sort of game you'll be playing. Now then, next up, we have one that is I've seen in the past as being a particularly strong one, the Tempest Domain. Gods whose portfolios include the Tempest Domain include Talos, Umberli, Cord, Zeboim, the Devourer, Zeus, and Thor. Govern seas and sky. They include gods of lightning and thunder, gods of earthquakes, some fire gods, and some gods of violence, physical strength, and courage. In some pantheons, a god of this domain rules over other deities, and is known for swift justice delivered by Thunderbolt. In the pantheons of seafaring people, gods of the domain are ocean deities, and the patrons of sailors. Tempest gods send their clerics to inspire fear in the common folk, either to keep those folk on the path of righteousness, or to encourage them to offer sacrifices or proportions to ward off divine wrath. This tends to be a very intense cleric, as you can read from that flavor text there. They're very devout and very hard-hitting. Now then, as far as those spells go, first level, you get Fog Cloud and Thunderwave. Third, Gust of Wind Shatter. Fifth, Call Lightning Sleet Storm. Seventh, Control Water Ice Storm. Ninth, Destructive Wave Insect Plague. Really, quite a few of these next couple clerics gain access to Insect Plague. Nature gets it, this guy gets it. I believe our next one actually can have access to it as well. As well as, if I recall correctly, Insect Plague is actually, I believe, available to all clerics, actually just as a base spell. And I find it to be very good area control type spells, as something like that deals decent chunk of damage, as well as really something that's going to keep enemies out of an area, and it also obscures vision within its area, so it's very good for cutting up the battlefield. Anyways, additionally, you gain proficiency with martial weapons and heavy armor, so that's honestly a big one. This is one of the tankiest clerics, gaining not only that extra damage with his martial weapons, but gaining that heavy armor, as well as their spell list provides them a number of area effect type spells. So this is a tank based cleric, very good for ranged or melee, and very good at area control. Honestly, I'd almost say this cleric almost feels like they're able to fill in too many roles, as they are honestly really strong, but sometimes it's okay to have the strong characters. I mean, you're playing D&D, it's a fantasy game, sometimes you want to feel like the strong guy. If you want to be the big strong guy, Tempest Cleric might be the way to go. At level 1, you also gain Wrath of the Storm. You can thunderously rebuke attackers. When a creature within 5 feet of you that you can see hits you with an attack, you can use your reaction to cause the creature to make a dex saving throw. Creature takes 2d8 lightning damage or thunder damage, your choice, on a failed saving throw, and half as much damage on success. You can use this feature number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, minimum of once, and you will gain augment uses when you finish a long rest. Now, this one, unlike the Nature Domain's ability to cause resistances as that reaction, this one does have a limit on number of uses, as I just said there. But even so, as a level 1 ability, this is quite strong, dealing an extra doing 2d8 damage to a character when they hit you is pretty big at level 1, especially when you're pretty low on hit points, as is at level 1. And of course, this ability is going to stay useful throughout, as even at high levels, maybe 2d8 doesn't seem that much, but if that's all it costs is your reaction, and your character's lacking on reactions, there's really not much reason not to use it, especially if you get to choose lightning or thunder damage for that damage type. Now, lightning damage, you're going to see a lot, but thunder damage is actually one of the abilities that you're going to see very few things having resistance to it. So that is a very good go-to, and almost very few, if not anything you encounter, is going to have resistance to thunder. So even at level 1, you'll be able to damage most enemies. At level 2, you gain your Channel Divinity, which is Destructive Wrath. Starting at 2nd level, you can use Channel Divinity to wield the power of the storm with unchecked ferocity. When you roll lightning or thunder damage, you can use your Channel Divinity to deal maximum damage instead of rolling. So let's just take in mind here. Let's say you do, Call Lightning. 5th level spell, does a shit ton of lightning damage, and now you use this ability and you just deal max damage. Now, don't get me wrong, as far as Channel Divinity abilities go, I feel like this one is pretty basic. Channel Divinities, you can only use them a couple times a day, and this one just lets you deal maximum damage on a single attack, spell attack like that. Now, that said, that is lightning or thunder damage. It doesn't specify spells, it simply specifies if you're dealing that damage type. Over the course of the campaign, you might find other means to deal that damage, not just your spells, but things such as some of your other class abilities, or perhaps even magical items acquired along the way. This could be used for those, and as a result, becomes very potent as a damage doing ability. As I said, this cleric is the heavy hitter. This is a cleric if you're actually lacking in offense. This is your guy. This one almost doesn't feel like a support character to me. It feels more like just a straight up damage dealing tank. But all the while, they still can fill that support role as they gain access to those area of control type spells. Things like Fog Cloud, Destructive Wave, Sleet Storm, Ice Storm. Sleet Storm and Ice Storm in particular, very good area control spells. Same with Insect Plague. Alright, next up, at 6th level, they gain Thunderbolt Strike. When you deal lightning damage to a large or smaller creature, you can also push it up to 10 feet away from you. Once again, that area control, forcing enemies away from you. And then you gain Divine Strike at level 8. This one is actually going to synergize very nicely with Thunderbolt Strike. You gain the ability to infuse your weapon strikes with Divine Energy. Once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can cause the attack to do an extra 1d8 thunder damage to the target. When you reach 14th level, damage increases to 2d8. Oh, my bad. My bad, never mind. This one does not synergize at all with Thunderbolt Strike, as this one deals thunder damage. Now, the thunder damage is good. As I said, very few things have resistance to it. But Thunderbolt Strike is only activated when it is lightning damage. So that is my bad there. I thought I recalled it being the other way around, but I guess not. With that in mind, though, I would almost feel like this Divine Strike would be of more use if it dealt lightning damage. But perhaps I would say they maybe made that decision because it was maybe getting too strong, and so they needed something to dumb that down a bit. And the final ability is Stormborn. At 17th level, you have a flying speed equal to your current walking speed whenever you are not underground or indoors. So if you're outside and you hit level 17, you can just fly now. Which is, I would say, really nice. But I feel like, don't get me wrong, at a 17 level, you're probably dealing with a lot of enemies that could gain flying abilities, you know. Really strong dragons, divine, or fiendish beings with wings and such. So it makes it easy to get at them, especially with all the close range abilities that this Cleric has access to. But I would say you start to lose. But I would say its final capstone ability is maybe not quite as potent as some others, especially when a lot of your kind of big bads you tend to end up fighting in indoor areas, you know, such as the evil lair or in a dungeon. So as such, I would say that this ability loses some points as it can only be used if you're fighting outdoors. It almost feels like you must go get use out of it in random encounters, or particularly large, or just in very large battlefield type scenarios, which I would say most games I've played with tend to steer away from those big type battlefields because it's more focused, because that doesn't too much focus on a smaller group of adventurers. But still, nonetheless, being able to just straight up fly is always pretty nice. Alright, 2 to go. Next up, Trickery Domain. Gods of Trickery, such as Timur, Beshaba, Aradamara, the Traveler, Glitter Gold, and Loki, are mischief makers and instigators who stand as a constant challenge to the accepted order among both gods and mortals. Their patrons are thieves, scoundrels, gamblers, rebels, and liberators. Their clerics are a disruptive force in the world, puncturing pride, mocking tyrants, stealing from the rich, freeing captives, and flouting hollow traditions. They prefer subterfuge, pranks, deception, and theft rather than direct confrontation. So, now then, this cleric plays quite a bit differently. It is definitely not a tank. It's definitely more range-oriented, I would say. It doesn't... They gain just based off their regular cleric spell list, are able to cut up battlefield pretty well. But you'll see from the spell list that a lot of the stuff is oriented towards more illusion type and trickery based things, as it is called the Trickery Cleric. This one is very good for getting around the battlefield quietly, helping your less sneaky allies sneak in such situations, as well as helping individuals in tough spots, and not so much necessarily large area of people at once. But this one does have a very fun playstyle, and I have actually played one of these myself before, and it was one of my favorite characters I've played to date. So let me just get into the spell list here. They gain Charm Person, Disguise Self at first level. Third level, Mirror Image, Pass Without Trace. Fifth, Blind, Dispel Magic. Seventh, Dimension Door, Polymorph. Ninth, Dominate Person, Modify Memory. Now, as you might have noticed, most of those are either going to affect a single target or yourself, with the exception of Pass Without Trace, which does affect a large area of people, and is a very potent stealth ability, especially for a large party that consists of multiple tanks who are probably kind of clanky and not too quiet. To follow up with those more stealth-oriented abilities you gain Blessing of the Trickster. Starting when you choose this domain at first level, you can use your action to touch a willing creature other than yourself to give it advantage on stealth checks. This blessing lasts for 1 hour or until you use this feature again. So you can use this throughout the day, but you can only have it active on one person at a time. This is perfect if you have someone who's wearing heavy armor in the party. You can give them that advantage to kind of help them prevent from bogging down the party with bad stealth rolls. So this is what I mean when I say this cleric is very good at helping individuals, either preventing yourself from being the target of attacks by turning invisible or using illusions to make the enemy think you're over there when you're actually over here. And you can do likewise to your allies to prevent enemies who seem to be targeting individuals. You can completely disrupt that flow of combat by tricking them up with your various illusion type abilities. So Channel Divinity, you gain Invoke Duplicity. This is honestly a pretty fun one. So with this, at second level, you can use a Channel Divinity to create an illusionary duplicate of yourself. As an action, you create a perfect illusion of yourself that lasts for 1 minute or until you lose your concentration, as if you were concentrating on a spell. The illusion appears in an unoccupied space that you can see within 30 feet of you, and as a bonus action on your turn, you can move the illusion up to 30 feet to a space you can see, but it must remain within 120 feet of you. For the duration, you can cast spells as though you were in the illusion space, but you must use your own senses. Additionally, when both you and your illusion are within 5 feet of a creature that can't see the illusion, you have advantage on attack rolls against the creature, given how distracting the illusion is to the target. So, like I said, this one is very good at targeting individuals. So you can either use this ability at long range to attack enemies or aid allies, or keep it close to yourself and give yourself your own little boost. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this is, as it does count as concentration, you cannot be casting concentration spells and focusing on this ability. So you have to focus a little more on individual type things, such as damaging type abilities or single target healing effects. The next ability gain is Channel Divinity Cloak of Shadows. You do actually gain 2 Channel Divinities with this cleric type. So at 6th level, you can use your Channel Divinity to vanish. As an action, you become invisible until the end of your next turn. You become visible if you attack or cast a spell. Now, this lasts for a very short amount of time, but being able to turn invisible without spending a spell slot is very useful, as you are not a tank-oriented cleric. You don't have that heavy arm efficiency. You don't have martial weapons, so you're probably gonna be a bit lighter on your feet than some other clerics out there, especially with its orientation towards stealth and whatnot. This is honestly one of the few, if not the only cleric where you actually want to make Dex probably one of your main skills. So turn invisible, sneak away from the enemy, and then pop back into existence and keep the train rolling. They do gain a Divine Strike ability, which is, I think, interesting. I think this one could have made use of more of a spell-oriented type of cleric ability, but they do gain Divine Strike, I would say, as a result of them being able to be very stealthy. So I think this one almost wants you to play a little bit like a spellcasting rogue. You know, sneak in there, maybe get a good hit, or in this case of a cleric, a good heal in, and then sneak away. In this case, the Divine Strike. Once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can cause the attack to do an extra 1d8 poison damage to target, and increases to 2d8 at level 14. Not much to say about that one. It's just a nice little potent poison on your hits if you are being forced into more of an attack situation. And the final ability with this one is Improved Duplicity. At 17th level, you can create up to 4 duplicates of yourself instead of 1 when you use Invoke Duplicity. As a bonus action on your turn, you can move any number of them up to 30 feet to a maximum range of 120 feet. Now, this one I feel like is a very good ability. Being able to create 4 of those duplicates and control all of them allows you to essentially act as a pocket, gives you the capability of acting as a pocket cleric to almost every member of your party. Probably every member of the party if you're playing with a smaller group. You can have one of your duplicates on each ally and provide healing to whichever one needs it for that turn, or other support type effects necessary, all the while leaving yourself free to move about the battlefield a bit more freely. And of course, as this is an illusion, the DM can very much play this off of the enemy being unsure which one is you, and having the enemies trying to attack your duplicates, which is going to not get them anywhere. All in all, this cleric I feel like plays the most different, as it is more of a dex-based cleric, very stealth and sneaky oriented, lots of illusions, whatnot, not tanky at all, but still very good at support roles. It is just a very unique take on the cleric, I'd say, and honestly, it's one of my favorites. Now then, our final cleric of the day is the War Domain. It's going to be another heavy hitter, very tanky. So, war has many manifestations. It can make heroes of ordinary people. It can be desperate and horrific, with acts of cruelty and cowardice eclipsing instances of excellence and courage. In either case, gods of war watch over warriors and reward them for their great deeds. The clerics of such gods excel in battle, inspiring others to fight the good fight or offering acts of violence as prayers. Gods of war include champions of honor and chivalry such as Torm, Helenis, and Kirajorloth, as well as gods of destruction and pillage such as Irathinol, the Fury, Grimesh, and Ares. Gods of conquest and domination such as Bane, Hexter, and Maglobiet. Other war gods such as Tempest, Nike, and Nuada take a more neutral stance, promoting war in all its manifestations and supporting warriors in any circumstance. Now then, your War Domain spells are as follows. First level, Divine Favor, Shield of Faith. Third, Magic Weapon, Spiritual Weapon. Fifth, Crusader's Mantle, Spirit Guardians. 7th, Freedom of Movement, Stone Skin. 9th, Flame Strike, Hold Monster. Now, as you can immediately see with that, a lot of those spells are more self-targeting and damage or defense oriented. So this is definitely straight up tank, straight up combat oriented cleric. Not too dissimilar from the Tempest Domain, though the Tempest Domain has a lot of ranged options when it comes to that, whereas the War Cleric is very melee oriented. This is of course promoted by the bonus proficiencies. They, just like Tempest, gain proficiency with both martial weapons and heavy armor. And at first level, they gain the ability War Priest. Your god delivers bolts of inspiration to you while you're engaged in battle. When you use the attack action, you can make one weapon attack as a bonus action. Use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier number of once, and you regain all expended uses when finished a long rest. So, though it is limited uses, at level 1, you pretty much immediately gain use of extra attack, though it does cost you your bonus action, so it's not a true extra attack. With that in mind, though, as I said, this is a cleric that's very focused on landing hits in melee combat. This is a very melee-oriented cleric, and honestly, it will have a playstyle a bit closer to a paladin, I would say. Now then, at level 2, you gain Channel Divinity, Guided Strike. You can use your Channel Divinity to strike with supernatural accuracy. When you make an attack roll, you can use your Channel Divinity to gain a +10 bonus to the roll. And you make this choice after you see the roll, but before the DM says whether the attack hits or misses. So for the most part, roll the dice. If it's a bad number, you choose to do this. But you gotta make sure you say this quickly, as some DMs will be very quick to say whether you hit or miss. This is a very good ability, especially one for an early on ability for so at level 2, you gain the capability to get a +10 bonus to an attack. That is pretty huge, as there's really not many abilities, if possibly not at all, that can give you such a bonus, especially at such a low level. This basically really turns you into like one of the main combatants of your party. Like, your War Cleric isn't necessarily your main support. He is almost more like a frontline attacker, honestly, who is just able to kind of support themselves. So if anything, I'd say War Cleric is a good choice if you're going to have more than one cleric in the party. Be good to have a more support-oriented cleric and then also a War Cleric to kind of help round out the tanking. And you actually gain a second Channel Divinity as this cleric as well. At the 6th level, you gain War Guard's Blessing. When a creature within 30 feet of you makes an attack roll, you can use your reaction to grant that creature a +10 bonus to the roll using Channel Divinity. And of course works the same. You gotta make that choice before you hear the DM tells you if the roll hits or misses. So this is where the support aspect of this cleric comes in. All those support abilities are going to be oriented towards attacking and defending. Though predominantly, especially based on this, more oriented towards attacking, ensuring your main front line of attacks and whatnot are landing their hits. So with that, you're able to basically ensure you're dealing potent amounts of damage on every turn of combat. Not just yourself, but your allies as well. Alright, and at level 8, you gain Divine Strike. Once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can cause the attack to deal an extra 1d8 damage of the type dealt by the weapon to the attack. And when you hit 14th level, extra damage comes 2d8. Now, this is one that I feel like this is maybe one of the weaker Divine Strike abilities, as it deals the extra damage, yes, but it's only an extra damage of the same damage type of the weapon you're using. So therefore, it is not really magical damage at all, I would roll. And as a result, I would say it would still be subject to creatures that have resistance to non-magical attacks. But it does synergize pretty well with the overall playstyle of this cleric, as they are very oriented towards just getting in there and getting hits. And the final ability of this one is the Avatar of Battle. 17th level, you gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks. And now there is where this cleric truly holds the spot as a main offense and not a support, as they can get in there and just keep on swinging. If the enemy's attacking them with non-magical attacks, they're barely taking hits at all. Especially considering at 17th level, your AC is probably pretty up there, considering you're able to use heavy armor and shields, as well as the possibility of gaining magical equipment by that point in the game. So this is going to be honestly one of the tankiest and heaviest hitting of the clerics, and is the last of the clerics we will be covering for today. So, as you can see, the cleric has a wide and versatile playstyle, a lot of them more oriented towards a much tankier type support, which is quite counter to support types such as the board, which is very light on the feet. Nonetheless, I would say there's essentially a cleric for most every playstyle of support, be it, quick and long range, close and tanky, or an odd blend of the two. There's a cleric for most everyone, I would say. And all those were just clerics in the base PHB. A number of others were added in other books, such as Xanathar's Guide to Everything and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and those clerics are also very good as well. We might cover those at another day. But as I do have a bit of a trip to get ready for, that is going to bring an end to today's stream. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you liked hearing about the cleric. As I said, they are actually one of my favorite classes, and in my opinion, probably the strongest class in 5th edition. So if you want to really be a powerhouse and a big boon to the party, go ahead and give the cleric a try. A lot of people tend to see it and they're just like, I don't want to be the support. Well, you've never been the support in D&D. Because everyone's going to love you, and you're going to love it too. Trust me. Unless that's just not your thing. In which case, like I said, play a character you enjoy. It's very important. But, for now, that's going to do it. Hope you guys had fun. And for now, I just wish you guys all a good day and safe travels. Bye.